Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for yet another session of the MtM and SAIMM collaboration for this week's webinar. Fortunately, it's going to be presented to us by Anyimadu, Tony, who's got a wealth of experience as far as industry is concerned in the whole minerals to metals value chain. So I'll give this time to Anthony. After the presentation, we shall have times for question and answer segments, and Tony will be there to answer the questions that we might have from the presentation. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you, Gladwin, and I'm very happy to be here. I recorded the presentation, so I'll play it now, and then we would have a good discussion afterwards. So let's. Can you, sorry, there's a play, I guess, yeah. The abstract, sorry, it has to start from the beginning. Okay, let's go for it. The abstract of this work, as you saw in the flyer, is that we have to, what I'm advocating here is that you have to sit back, look in detail at the material characteristic, and then use as much advantages as you can, instead of just relying on engineering templates, which are easiest to do, but then you may miss some of the attributes of the material. Okay, so here when I say value add, and what I mean is that it has to affect the bottom line in the four main areas that I've chosen. And these days we start from ESG, which is environmental and safety and governmental. So operability and safety, it should impact on it. The second thing is, of course, the tons, throughput, efficiency, recovery, and then the cost. So that's what this is the envelope I have identified as the value added. Of course, there are a lot more other nuanced value add, but we're not talking about that. Okay, so what are the insights we are going to talk about today? The first one is, and all the insights sound obvious from the beginning, but I would discuss it to try and fish out a few things that we probably have or haven't thought about. The first one is grind. It starts with the grind. So what I'm saying here is grind as fine as economically possible, but not finer. I'll explain what that means. The second insight is utilize all tools, including modeling and simulation, for rate value add. It's normally the most inexpensive way. And the third insight is where the characterization of the ore allows, you must exploit the heterogeneity and technology, including relatively new ones that are in terms of the technology. In other words, allow yourself not to be too quick to stamp your design onto an existing template, but try and explore everything. It will pay in the end. And then number 4, intensely observe and utilize opportunities during the testing, beyond just satisfying the traditional design criteria for the process engineering. Of course, that has to be done, but in addition, you can always scrutinize. So what I'm saying is that let the people who are going to design the plant have intimate interaction with those who are doing the testing. Okay, let's start from 1. Grind as fine as economically possible, but not finer. I mean, there are issues around that. Grind is extremely important, of course. That's why we spend most of the money, where we spend most of the energy and the money. So it's important for everyone. But what do I mean by here? I'm going to use an example to explain what I mean, and we discuss. So this is a flotation setup that I did quite a bit of time ago. And as you can see, you start from the coarse grind, and the grind, as the grind gets better, the grade, which is grams per ton of the platinum in that case, and the recovery, so goes up. So what you are expecting here is that you want the curve to go into the right-hand corner. So as you can see, progressively from 20, 25, 30, 35%, 50% passing 75 micron, as your grind get finer, as expected, your recovery gets finer, better, much better, which is good, no news there. But the second part of the statement I've made is that, but not finer. So when you go to the next one, if you try and push your luck too much, this was the 75% passing 75 micron that you saw. As soon as we got to 80, we go back. So not only are you wasting energy, you are wasting, you are actually going to a lower technical performance. So again, we know the end shape, too fine, not good, too coarse, not good. But we would use these to discuss exactly what it means. And the reason this is important is because many people think, just a little bit, 5, 10% up or down doesn't really matter, but I think it does. Okay, so in that same plant, it's a big, massive platinum plant. This just illustrates our attempt at increasing recovery with different tools that we have available. This is, of course, not the overall recovery. This was a recovery of a certain size stream, which was difficult. So the standard one was just less than 20% recovery. Now we attempted to improve recovery by increasing residence time, adding more reagents, progressively adding more reagents. We moved 5% up, which was still some improvement, but not quite. Then we milled a little bit, moved the recovery 10 further percent. Then we milled more and moved the recovery a further 10%. So from 18, we moved to 42. That's millions of dollars. So what are we saying? What I'm saying here is that you could attempt to move recovery with different methods, and they all come at different operational costs and so on. But in my assessment, if you haven't done the grind properly, in terms of sustainably getting the recovery, it's always all the other methods or attempts at methods is going to be suboptimal by nature. So what I'm saying is that don't try and solve a grind problem with other things, which may give you a little bit here and there, but it will cost you a lot, and it is definitely not sustainable. So what is the design and cost implications? As I just said, it's apparent that higher recoveries can be attained through different means. And number two is, what is being advocated here is that there are more cost-effective and sustainable way of achieving consistent recovery, and it will almost inherently be suboptimal to attempt to solve liberation challenges with other efforts like residence time reagent, so on. And then the results typically doesn't give the same recovery and increases of OPEX. Over life of mine, an inadequate or wrongly designed comminution circuit therefore loses significant value to the project. And many times it's not so obvious. If you look at a typical plant with a fluctuating recovery, and more importantly, when you try and float the tails, you get quite a variability in the extra recovery that you could have obtained. It shows you that there's a certain solid item which is moving, which is the grind. Then what I'm advocating here is that at any particular time, throughput versus recovery versus cost, that operating window needs to be fully understood to ensure that the value is not lost. I mean, having said that, I've run plants before, and I know that as a plant manager, you really struggle to tell your bosses in the corporate office why you are willfully reducing recovery, even if you can show, why you are willfully reducing throughput, even if you can show that the resultant ounces will be better. I'm saying that obviously we all know the quickest way to get more ounces, even if it's inefficient, is more throughput. Now, just a slide to ensure that this thing is home. It's not just a nice to have. This is an actual plant, one of our plants. I'm not going to mention which one. And this is data collected over 3 years. And within that, you see that the more the variability within the grind circuit here, the more the variability within the recovery. So that's the point I'm making. So it's not just an artifact. It's basically saying, in spite of all your optimization efforts, you have to try and quieten the grind fluctuations. And once you do that, you minimize the fluctuation in the recovery. Here, the up and down risk or optimization, depending on how you look at it, is millions of dollars. It's typically up to almost 5% recovery. And for a big or medium plant, you're talking at least $1 million a year. So this is the point, to use actual data to illustrate my there are other things which are called outstanding questions, which further research is going on, and I advocate that other people look at it through their plans, that there are certain questions that we still need to answer. So far, we are using in the industry 1 point PAT or percent passing 75 micron as a measure. It's better than nothing, but it's definitely not the best, because I don't think flotation or any of that other separation units care too much about just the 1 point on the curve. So I'm advocating that we use the whole curve if possible. But how do you use that in a non-cumbersome way? So I want us to spend some time on research on effect of shape on the curve and liberation and consequences to recovery. So my proposal is that we use 3 points and then 2 gradients to characterize the shape to replace the PAT eventually. How do you implement that? Well, I've got 2 suggestions here. But I'm saying if steeper particle size distribution as obtained in the HPGR is actually beneficial for recovery, how do we tweak existing overwhelmingly sag and ball circuits and their classification systems to reduce the cost and fine edges of the curve? We could do something. And then after that, what are other manipulatable variables within the combination circuit that affect this shape that we could do something about? Okay, so but those are questions that we should continue. But even though you are using 1 PAT now, you should try and limit that fluctuation as much as possible. So as you can see, if the 1 point is fluctuating this much, then the curve, complete curve I'm talking about is probably all over the place. Okay, so that's the first insight. Let's go to the second insight. I'm saying, again, it's nothing new. I'm advocating that modeling and simulation as tools for improvement should be used as frequent as possible. The reason why many problems are not solved is that they are just too complicated. And in a typical metallurgy plant, you move in over 100, 500 different pieces of factors. And so people just leave it and manage what they can. So what I'm saying here is that let's take some of those modeling tools, and there's quite a few good number of them from all the different players. I'm going to illustrate one of them. Here is the integrated extraction simulator, which some of the South African operations have been strong support of, and we've been developing as part of the Amira, in this case, the P9, right away from P9Q, P9L to P9Q, as we have it now. What is it? It's really representing the whole circuit those who are used to JK SAIMM will know that you can basically represent the circuit in your computer program. And I'm advocating 3 things: that there are 2 almost people who are working with these, who are sitting in the different parts. The first part is the researchers who are very familiar with this in the universities and so on, who do this. And the second part is the operators, the plant themselves, who hardly use this, first because it's cumbersome or it's difficult. So I'm advocating that we draw it together by just concentrating on 3 things. That first, collect enough data from the plant to make sure that you can represent the model, which that one is easy. Second, do the plant-based case. In other words, model the plant as it exists now into your computer or into the models, and then fit it. And this is where the assistance with some of the researchers and experts come in. But fit it and don't stop in the middle. Fit it until what you see, you like it. You know, and in the case of comminution, what are we talking about? We're talking about just 3 players. We're talking about throughput. We are talking about kilowatt hour per ton of the energy used, and we are talking about the output, which is the particle size distribution of the material ground. That's just the 3. So you have to fit your model in a pragmatic way where your results looks like what I'm showing here. And so it's not perfect, but at least it basically says if the model can now tell me what is currently obtaining in the plant, then I'll be more likely to rely on its prediction of what I haven't tried. And hence, That's where the value comes in. So you can try a few scenarios and then pay your money. And I'll show you so here the 720 or 17 tons per hour, which is the throughput, kilowatt hour per ton around 7s, and both the model and the actual plant are saying the same thing, and 5.2 and 5.37, and the cyclone overflow 144 and 141. So basically we're saying the key things that matter, we've captured it, and therefore we have there. Of course, the actual model, as you saw in the first graph, contains quite a lot of parameters that need to be fitted and so on, but that if you put the money on this, which is why I'm showing you this, then it will be worth your energy to actually invest in working with the people, and then making sure more importantly, making sure your own metallurgists and engineers understand it. Okay. So then the third point is simulate for increased throughput in this case. So you simulate all the different areas of the plant and run it until you are happy that it's mass balanced and model fitted nicely. And what do you get in this case? I've just said, you can see I'm quite excited about it. So doable, optimized case within the current installed capacity. 2 key areas. Why? Well, it's doable because the different machines working together actually can do it. And secondly, you don't have to pay a lot of money. You are really using the knowledge and the labs within the system, and in this case, changing recirculating loads and cyclone pressure and feed to get yourself 30 tons per hour more. It sounds like nothing, but it translates into millions of dollars. So your installed capacity without going to buy any new, more expensive mills can actually help you to get into 30 tons per hour more. Now, why this gives you confidence, and of course, you gradually implement it as you did in this case. Because if you don't have these numbers behind it, of course, you'll be scared to push the machines too much, and you don't want to go spoil expensive machines. So this is what I'm advocating, that do it in methodical fashion, and then make sure it is done. And then it gives you the confidence to go ahead. Of course, you have to consult the guys for the mechanical and electrical integrity of the machines to ensure you don't do it alone as a process engineer, as we know. Okay. Now, the third insight that we want to talk about is, of course, cost separation. It is nothing new. And nothing I'm saying here is new, but I'm discussing it to explore the effect that I'm advocating people to use it, because it provides potentially more money than we think. So, cost separation, this presentation can be a whole presentation by itself, but I will make sure I keep to the essential elements, so we don't utilize all the time. So what here is exciting. Why? Because you have to intensely look at the material, look at this, especially heterogeneity, and then say, well, since it is already different from underground, what can I do to actually separate it or throw some away and so on? So we've all heard about ore sorting, and we look at the material to see first if it is a good candidate or not. And if it is, what would be the engineering steps you take before you can retrofit or start a new plant where applicable. So this example I'm showing is one of our AGA plants, and you look at it and it's like day and night underground. So the material in situ is quartz, which is quite grayish, milky, and the rest are greenish black. Fortunately, or even more importantly for us, the mineralogy and the gold associations are made of mainly these two. So one is sulfides, arsenopyrites mainly, and the other is quartz. So the quartz is, of course, physical 3 million gold. The right grind, you get late 90s of it, like a South African ore. So what can you do? The existing plant, of course, like most places, it's crush, grind, flotation, oxidation. Where the material is refractory, you use biox, and then you get it. But everything goes together, like most 90% of plants. So what am I advocating? That when you have good fortune like this, you should actually get into the material and try and exploit it using whatever available technology that you have. So in this case, as I said, this is the existing circuit. So you follow it. It's a complex sulfide plant, which includes crush, grind, flotation, regrind of the concentrate, bacterially oxidizing the material to prepare it for leaching, and then the rest follows: the carbon absorption and recovery, and then smelting. So that by itself is a complex sulfide ore. But I'm advocating that before you even get here, you use the material characteristic and at the end of the secondary creation, just split it or do something with it. Take advantage of that complete, visually different material. Okay, so that's what, and just to, so what is the economic opportunity here? Here in this case, what you are seeing, the two things you are seeing here is tons of material that is quartz linked with percent of material that is quartz linked versus sulfide linked. And then on the other hand, what actual gold content. So you're talking about the same thing, but it's slightly in a different way. So when you look at this, is currently, which we are here around 2021, sulfide is still around 50 to 60%, sulfide gold, and the quartz gold is making up the rest, for about 40%. But as the mining gets deeper in this place, the quartz gold, which is the easy gold, actually becomes about 60%, sometimes even close to 70%. So whatever opportunities we identify and do use here would actually be better as the time goes by. So that's what we're saying, that this is not some fluke sample we took and said, oh, let's change the whole circuit because of that. From the geology and from the material horizon expected over 30 years, we see that that trend is continuing. So it's a fantastic opportunity to explore. So what do? Then you sit back and then you do a simulation of what it could look like. Here, what we have done here is, so look at this circuit with the frame of mind of pre-concentration, basically. So pre-concentration, that is before it gets into the grind and the rest of the circuit, as I showed you, follows. So here we said, okay, the material doesn't just have pyrite and arsenopyrite, it also has graphite. And so this is throwing the whole kitchen sink at it, which is, can you actually exploit it and take about 3 or 4 different products? So in this case, high sulfur, high quartz, high sulfur. The graphite, if you can take it at a coarse product, it actually fetches quite a lot of money, and the rest. But when we did that, obviously, if you do that, you lose about 1.8% of gold before you've started the treatment proper, just at the secondary crusher product stage. When you use the ore sorter, you expect to lose about 1 to 1.5% of the gold. Okay, so that's what you could do if you were going crazy to separate everything that could be separated. In this case, in conjunction with TOMRA in Germany, we found that trying to separate arsenopyrite and pyrite is too finicky, they are too close. So you will lose some money. So we said, okay, so we did stages, about 5 different types, and then I said, come on, let's just do the most simple one to begin as a start, which is separating the quartz from the sulfur. That's it. In other words, the quartz, the grayish, milky material you saw, and the darkish, greenish, blackish material you saw. So that's it. So if you do that and you decide that, unlike typical sorting project where you have to reject some material, we're not rejecting anything. So of course, we keep 100% of the gold before, and this is still pre-concentration, before we lose whatever efficiency at the different units, as we already know. So what are we saying? We're saying that in this case, at least 25% by mass of the material will be quartz. What does that mean? It means you're not going to spend your excessive energy, reagents on flotation, oxidation, and so on. You basically take it it becomes like a very inexpensive South African ore, and then it joins, you crash grind, and it joins the leach, through gravity, of course. So that's the opportunity. And then when we started looking at the material itself and said, well, okay, this material, when you crash it, how does it produce? And why is this important? It's important because the ore sorting has to be set up for what it can do. Now, currently, the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, will guarantee plus 20 millimeters, up to say minus 60 millimeters or coarser. So if you break it to that point, how much material is actually retained in that? Here, in our case, we're very lucky because close to 60, and in some cases about 80% of the material is in that fraction, which means most of the material is in sorter if you set it up, which is quite good. Okay, if you wanted to use the final material, pushing the ore sorter to make a bit, you could actually end up with about 80 to 85% of the material. But we're saying just take the very coarse, nice interval let us see the sorter. These are two separate materials that were tested. So this is the visual presentation. Okay, so then the next question, the third question is, can the material actually be sortable? Well, this looks like a Christmas tree. It's like night and day. The quartz, this is the laser, and the quartz response to the laser is very shiny, whilst the others are not. And so when they tested, you could get over 99% of all the quartz reporting to where you want it. So that means visually, when we were excited underground, the machine is also excited. It can really see most of the quartz, and you can actually separate it. And this is we're not going to go deep into the ore sorting technology, but essentially they are all in secondary crusher product. They come and then some respond to the laser in this case, and some laser is of course not the only technology or underlying technology you could use. You could use radio, whatever, but in this case it's laser because it's quartz and it lights up, and then you separate it. Then how do you use it in our current circuits? Thankfully, we actually are scoring into this graph is showing the effect, which is not that the effect of sulfide or grade on the recovery. The more you could pull the mass of the sulfide into the concentrate, the more your sulfide concentrate goes up. And then with it, the gold concentrate goes up. Most of the gold here in this, as I told you, was apart from the quartz, is really the sulfide, and the sulfide mainly arsenopyrite. But why is it exciting? Well, it's exciting because of the method we are using to do the oxidation. The BIOX, if you put too much mass, you pull too much gangue with it, and therefore the sulfur percentage goes down. But at the same time, it's a catch-22. If you don't pull enough, you don't get your recovery of gold in the first place. Here we are not floating, or we are not processing the flotation tails. We throw it away. So you need to get as much of your gold in the flotation concentrate as possible, and then, but at the same time, it has to be high quality grade enough for the BIOX to be happy, the bacteria to be happy. So what are we doing? We are saying that anything that can remove 25% of the mass right at the beginning, like we are advocating here with the sorter, you can already upgrade, inadvertently upgrade your sulfide, and therefore get your ability to pull more mass and not compromise recovery in there. So it's twice, you score twice. Okay. So what is the discussion of the opportunity as I just discussed? We are saying the gold association in this AGA side occurs principally within quartz veins and arsenopyrite. The heterogeneity in the bulk mineralogy allows all sorting of crushed product into quartz and non-quartz. And the removal of the quartz accounts for roughly 25% of the material to be treated in the current sulfide route, upgrading the sulfide system in its wake. Then the biooxidation process installed at this site puts a minimum sulfur concentrate grade limit on the flotation process. This in turn causes a flotation mass pool length recovery loss in the flotation step. So what are we doing? So the mass reduction created by the ore sorting, the quartz upgrades the sulfur content of the feed and allows a higher mass pool. That improves the recovery of the sulfide gold. So the sorted quartz with associated gold follows a simple grind leach route, like in the South African ore, while the sulfide stream goes through flotation BIOX, then joins the leaching stream as is currently the case. And now this value created in this study arises out of improvement in flotation recovery and the reduction in flotation reagent consumption for the 25% that doesn't need to go through the complex circuit. So what's the business case? It's fantastic. It's essentially, it's an IRR of 152, NPV of, at that current rate, it was over 150 million life of mine. Now with the opportunities I showed you about costs actually getting more and more, this is just moving towards $200 million for life of mine. So it's absolutely massive value, which comes from scrutinizing what the natural endowment is and tweaking the engineering design a bit. So when the ore allows it like this, it's a no-brainer. It's fantastic. Okay, so I've spoken about other opportunities, like how, because we can now put the sulfides, miners can now mine more and all that. So we won't go through that, but it's there in the paper. Okay, so to end with the last insight, I'm saying that normally we take material, we do the studies in the laboratory or pilot plant to try and harvest the key details for the design criteria for the engineering design. That's good. So we do things like liberation grind, residence time, reagents, dosage, those are all fine. So what am I saying? What I'm saying here is that in addition to that, when you scrutinize whilst you are doing the, especially flotation test, but other tests too, you may pick up some artifacts and things that you could actually use in the design, which don't come from the standard template. Okay. Let's look at some of them from an actual project that I was part of. Okay, so what you see here, if I didn't tell you, or if you didn't read the title, you would probably say we are floating 3 separate material from 3 separate projects easily. The color is different, the impetus is different, and everything is different. But this is from the same deposit, and all these 3 material are supposed to, or pieces, types of material are supposed to go through the same circuit. So what am I saying? I'm saying that you will only see these extreme behavior when you do the direct call separately, number 1. Obviously, there are other reasons why you have to do composites, which we are going to discuss now. So this is at the same time a challenge and an opportunity. So how would you know this? Well, if all you did was to do this test and then collect the data and assays and then wait and do your engineering calculations and do your design, you wouldn't notice these intent artifacts. So what am I saying? I'm saying you should fish out the extreme behavior in addition to establishing the traditional characteristics of composites. Now, what we obviously will do compositing of different material from the mineralogically different zones and do testing for the bulk or residence time and those sort of other issues. But you have to do that obviously in conjunction with the intended mining plants and plant arisings. That's typically done now. With or without blending, that's also typically done. But what I'm saying is that extreme behavior from individual records need to be taken account of, including things like preg-robbing behavior that may not be widespread within the whole circuit, okay, or may not be evenly distributed in the deposit, as well as behavior that I call saturating or concentrating in nature. Some of that is easy ones like material that has the propensity to become pebble forming material, which is in the milling circuit that we already know that it keeps in. It's a pebble for a reason, so it keeps in. But typically that material may not be evenly spread throughout there. So depending on how you bring your material through the plant, you need to take a look after that properly. But there are other hidden ones like clayey or viscous material as well as froth, the ones that need froth washing, which may not be. So you may not, your composition of your material that you tested may not show it, as you saw in the color, in the 3 different colors and so on. So from that particular work that we did for a big project, what I could see then and we used in the design was that there were, of course, apparently varied responses to grinding and flotation of behavior, okay, which is whatever flotation circuit you put, these materials would. The days where the plant is sort of treats a lot of material fractions from those places, you're going to have issues. All flotation kinetics mapped to the individual cost tested if you can. But more importantly, the optimization opportunities in that particular case included that when you watch the material and how it floats, beyond just the calculation and the rate discussion, you could actually see that typically when after 7 minutes, it just became very lethargic. And what we do typically, we will just dose more reagents in there with more cost. But I found that, and I just tested it, that if you just increase the energy a little bit, not even just the energy, you could actually get the same amount of material. So, for example, you could actually have that in mind, and in a very non-normal way, make sure that at the middle of the plant, the energy is not lethargic to bring it up in combination with the air. That doesn't cost you any operating cost, and over a life of mine, you're talking lots of money. You can only see that when you scrutinize the material as it's being tested, okay? number one. Number two, that you saw that you wouldn't see by just sitting back and waiting to do your calculations, is that dark material, presumed carbonaceous, will need a good froth washing of the sticky concentrate. That's what we did, and then we were able to get the recovery up. So if you didn't provide froth washing, for example, on the circuit, then the day that material predominates, you are going to have a problem. Okay. So, and then more big, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on today, is that when we saw this and we step back and say, actually, you know what, this entire circuit, from what we have studied from this this testing, what can we do? Because the circuit was going to be done like a normal crash, grind, float, leach, concentrate, regrind, and leach. But we saw that when you tested what you do after you've got your flotation concentrate, you realize that there was quite a lot of magnetic material in there. And thankfully, a lot of that magnetic material didn't contain much gold. So once you insert magnetic separation in there, after you've collected the flotation concentrate, what you do is you reduce your mass of the concentrate, number one. But more importantly, that material, a lot of magnetites and some other material, when they are finely ground, they account for almost half of that cyanide, subsequent cyanide consumption that you were going to use. And so that was fantastic, because then it adds huge value in terms of reducing your subsequent cyanide concentration for the leaching. So you are really helping the operating cost in a massive way by first grinding without those magnetites, and second, a few other species, and secondly, basically reducing the propensity to chew the cyanide without actually getting any improvement in the gold. So that's what you did. So all this come from scrutinizing so there's so many opportunities, and of course they are all mineralogy dependent. So as I've illustrated in these four examples, mineralogy, the test, scrutiny, and actually sitting back and say, of course, OEMs will give you their guarantees on certain things, but you should insert in there whatever you can to ensure that you are getting the best you can from this natural endowment of your ore. I think.
And Tony?
Thank you, everyone. Yes, thank you. And that was the end of the presentation, and we can now have some good discussions or questions. Questions and comments are welcome.
Okay. I'm looking at if I'm missing any raised hands.
Yes, we've got Mehdi Safari that's got a raised hand.
Mehdi, please go ahead.
Hi, Anthony. Hope you are well. Good to see you and see your great presentation. Actually, I really enjoyed when I follow and read your paper also before. We are aware of this sort of ore sorting, and as you actually mentioned, it's very dependent to ore characteristics. Sometimes you can't do that. Now, my only concern will be, now when your mass pool increase, as you mentioned actually in one of your points, the viscosity of your froth will increase dramatically. Even if you put wash water, sometimes you can't control it. It means that your entrainment will increase a lot. How do you handle that issue? And the second question was, you said about the magnetite, you remove it before go to the leaching. Isn't it was possible to remove that magnetite also at the beginning of the line before coming into flotation process? Thank you.
Thank you, Eti. Good questions. Let's start with the second one. Yeah, the liberation size of the magnetite species were unfortunately in such a way that when you apply even after secondary crashing, when we tried to remove the magnetites, there was a bit, but it wasn't very efficient. So unfortunately, we had to take it through the system, spend a bit of money on it, and then. But luckily, in the froth, it really we removed, I think we were only left with about 12% of it, which was way better. There were quite a few other species. The names escape me now, but it was really a brilliant way of not only reducing our ray grind size of machine, but more importantly, that cyanide. We literally dropped the cyanide consumption by about 37 to 40%. And over life, that was fantastic. So I really passionately advocate that people look at not just magnetite, but anything in there that can tweak the traditional circuit. It really pays, and it's very satisfying. Okay, your first question about froth, which one were you referring to? Which of the two, for examples? Were you talking about the ore sorting product without the quartz?
Yes, actually, when you said if you remove the quartz, basically now you have high sulfide and your concentrate will be heavy mass loaded.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so yeah, it is true. I mean, froth loading, and I'm actually sitting in Cape Town University at the moment where they have a lot of these know-how on froth and froth selectivity and so on. So your froth will look slightly different, but remember that the whole flotation was designed for the sulfides and the pyrites and arsenopyrites. So the more the merrier. But they are loaded quite well, but they will fortunately go through the regrind stage, and then you have the chance to prepare them before the bacteria sees it. But you're right, but it's not a big problem at all. We don't touch the percent solids, but we touch the water addition in terms of the froth washing. But that's a very small problem to have, rather than not having enough sulfides, and therefore the more you pull gunk in your desperate attempt to try and get enough gold, but at the same time, then the sulfide concentrate, the sulfur concentrate in the sulfur percentage in the concentrate reduces and the bacteria suffers. And when you do that, like it happens in real life, when many times the material coming doesn't have enough sulfides to start with, then you have no choice but to actually just buy a lot of sulfuric acid and augment it, which is quite high operation cost. So I hear you about the froth washing, but it's the least of your worries. It's a very small problem to solve. Thank you.
Okay. Is there another question? I can't see a hand. Camilla, you can help me if you can see a hand.
No, there aren't any raised hands, and there's no questions in the chat either.
Okay. Tony, maybe just a generic question. You were focusing on gold in the presentation. How transferable is it to other metal sulfide ores, the approach that you took? I know that flotation is akin to those.
Yeah, well, gold was two of the examples, but the first one was platinum. And the flotation, which appeared in twice, was actually as you know, most platinum is, and copper as well. So most of the insights here actually apply to all gold, platinum, and copper, which are the key minerals that you are looking at. So yes, I mean, sorting, flotation, copper, we all know copper floats very well. And the PGMs, the pyrrhotite and the pentlandite also float well. So all the insights here almost always apply to all of them. Definitely for sorting, definitely for liberation grind targets and minimization of fluctuations. So it really applies to all those commodities.
Okay, thank you. Jeremy has got a hand.
Oh, Jeremy. Jeremy, you are muted.
Am I still muted?
Yeah. You are fine now. You are fine now.
Oh, thanks, Tony, for a really great presentation. And it seems a lot of the examples you're looking were done, I guess, using the data of the test data during design or a specific test date after. My question is we have now such tools like the IES, big data, twin streaming. You know, do you think we're doing enough research to start actually using existing data about core drills, geological domaining, all of that historic data that really actually one pinpoints the location of the source of the ore body and gives us a lot more advanced knowledge about the ore that's going to hit the plant. The plant is fixed. You're not going to be able to do much changes, but I just seem to think that we are now have, if we could start doing the research and the integration of the various tools that we have, that we could start using a lot more historical advanced knowledge about the ore body to really add a lot more value. Whether in all parts of the circuit, whether it's comminution or flotation or leaching or course upgrading, those sort of things. I mean, I'd like to hear a comment on that.
Yeah, no, fantastic topic, Jeremy. It's where we are going now. You can't help it. You would have to get into the just the opportunities that those processing and big data and AI they provide. So a lot is actually going on in the individual mining houses, but a lot more can be done in a concerted fashion. It's where we're doing the so-called geometallurgy now, and some tactical, some so-called strategic. But for example, now that we've done some work where we actually can harvest the energy used on certain pieces of ore through the plant. Not every plant is set up for this kind of thing. If you have enough delineation of what blends come in, you could actually do that. And we've done one in one of our plants, Tropicana in Australia. And it's fantastic. You can, once you have a clean method, for example, and I'm just talking comminution and energy now. And if you can track all the attributes from the geology and from the drill course through to the plant, you can score quite a bit and prepare for it. Let's go back, say, sort of 20 years, PPL, Port Petersburg. They had such difficult material that if you didn't know 2 weeks in advance what was going to come, both your throughput and your recovery would just go down the drain. And so that was like a survival type of geometallurgy already. But now we move to what the scene you are suggesting now, which is essentially solving the same problem with just the sheer might of the processing power in the different areas. Not just the process engineering side, but also with the geologists and their spectral measurement and all that. They have such knowledge of what is coming now that if we know it and we use it, we can really gain. But let me end on one other point. I think there's a lot of measurement happening, but in my assessment, I advocate that the manipulator variables that we can use, both in the comminution and the flotation, whether we are adding more or less reagents or changing sometimes even just a percent solid so we can get selectivity in the flow, or on the comminution side, adding more or less steel balls, like in a regulated fashion. I think a lot of that work has not been done yet. I think at the moment we have lots and lots of information about things, but when somebody who is, say, a lawyer or an accountant asks you the root question, or if you collect all this data, how are you going to give me more gold? Sometimes you actually need to think that we, especially in metallurgy, process engineering, we have to actually try and do some junctions work, as I call it. So if you know all that information coming, what are you going to do about it within your circuit? And of course, if it's a new circuit, even better, then you can actually tweak for it. Have 2 or 3 templates as when this material comes, this is the recipe and so on. But many times you don't have that kind of good fortune. The plant is already set up. So at least you'll be able to tweak things in there to take advantage of what is coming. But yeah, I completely agree with you, Jeremy. We have to go there. Everybody is going there. Every other profession is taking advantage of the massive ability to process data. And if we know it before it comes, then let's get the best operating window for it so that we can.
Thank you, Jeremy, for that question. And thank you, Tony, for the answers. Are there any other hands that are still up? if I'm missing any, the other team members can help me.
Nothing raised, Gledwin.
Okay. Tony, just a general question to the industry. We know that we've got small scale miners contributing roughly about 20% to the world's gold production. And you, the big players, contributing the balance. How much of that information do you eventually share with them in terms of enhancing their own processes and trying to contribute towards more sustainable resource recovery for the greater good of society in general?
Very good question. I'm smiling because I think those sort of interactions should actually be facilitated by people like yourselves in terms of SAIMM and SAMRI, which Jeremy is a big part of. I think those sort of governmental or NGO type of associations need to bring the things together and do things like what we are doing now. So for example, today, any of the small players could be encouraged to join and basically take the knowledge and join. As far as, I'm not running away from the question, but I know that, you know, on some level, collusion, whether it's knowledge, sharing of knowledge or fixing prices or all those things are illegal. So on some level. So for you to get, say, BHP to sit down with a small player, it will be quite difficult. But luckily, we have these associations. And in fact, there's no, whether it's flotation or comminution or energy work, or there's loads and loads of data and interaction that could happen if they are facilitated by people like SAIMM and even the universities. So it's a very good question. Apart from the corporate social investment and those sort of things, which don't really happen to small scale, except in some areas where these days, if you are going to mine, one of the easiest way to get your license to mine is to make sure you have a little bit of the deposit for the local people and encourage them to make it work. And that basically saying, instead of taking money and profit and giving to them, you are basically encouraging them to do their own in your next door corner, and then they set the gold or the platinum or the copper back to you. So that is happening. But your question goes beyond that. Your question is saying many small players are actually struggling and using methods which we know in the big corporates that doesn't work, for example, or too costly, for example. But I would throw the question back at you and say, and use SAIMM and bodies like that to actually pull those small people in or small companies in, so that these information, which are basically public, can actually be shared. More and beyond that, the interaction and the networking that go with it actually will be fantastic. So convince them to join, and that's how they get it basically for free.
Thank you very much, Tony, for that answer. I cannot see any further questions. So with that, Tony, I would like to thank you for sparing your time amidst your very busy schedule, and everyone else who managed to join us in this very interesting topic. So we want to see how we're moving from the studies of operating plants and the 4 value lessons that you presented to us. And hopefully we can have those cascading to the smaller players and push the sustainability of all our accessing these valuable metals going into the future. So with that, thank you. Join us again on the second Wednesday from this fortnight. And we continue discussing some very important insights. Thank you once again, Tony. Thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you everyone for sparing your time. It was my pleasure. All the best.